Hello, hello. Pete Oslin, Eric Staley here with Bending Rules, where we talk about all things entrepreneurial. We've got a guest here today, Jeff Megy. He's also been an entrepreneur his whole life, more or less, from what I understand. I guess that's what I'm going to find out in a minute. He and Eric have worked together, done some deals throughout their lives, and he's had what I understand to be a very colorful career. Just kind of remind everybody, bending rules, what we're going for here is we're just trying to have a dialogue with guys that, have built businesses that are 0 to 100 million. 100 million would be amazing if someone's done that, but somewhere in that sort of lane, because that represents the majority of what entrepreneurs in the United States have done. And obviously there's outliers and, those will emerge too here. But I'm curious to know Jeff's story today and how he got started in his career and what he does and the lessons he's learned. And I guess the first thing that was kind of a point of curiosity for me, because Eric and I were having a conversation the other week on the podcast, and he was talking about his mentor, and he didn't mention by name that it was actually you. He said, I had this mentor and he kind of forced me to sell my car. And that sort of led to a lot of, that got him down the path of understanding the trade-off of money and return on investment, and why it didn't make sense to have this car that he actually adored at the time, and probably could obviously now buy again if he wants. And so I thought that was kind of a cool genesis to his story. And so, like with you, Jeff, I was thinking, obviously we'll get into what you've done professionally and things like that, but did you have like mentors like that in your path that, at some inflection point that made you kind of realize this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to be good at, and maybe just give me a little background of that and how that was set up, for you and your progression towards that, if you will, if you're cool with that.
Well, thanks for having me, Pete and Eric. Been buddies a long time, and yep, I'm the bad guy on the car.
Asshole.
So glad you were an asshole.
Just to close out that story, just full disclosure.
Oh, no. Okay.
I said, what if you could buy 50 of those later? You sell one now, you buy 50 later. And now you can buy much more than that. And so, pressing outside your comfort zone is not a bad thing. And your question was, how did I get started? Late 80s, there wasn't any real estate gurus to read about and get learned on. And come the early 90s, there started to be a few. But I was just a babe in the woods and had a neighbor down the street who wanted to sell a house, and took it on contract and learned a lot on that deal. $28,000 in Corvallis.
So this is Corvallis, where you were living at the time, where you're born and raised, or Corvallis? Okay.
I spent half my childhood in Southern California.
Okay.
But $28,000. I owned it for 2 months and put a roof on it. Was the first mayor of Corvallis's home. Wow. Built in like the 1860s. Yeah, and sold it 2 months later, and just blindly going through it. But I knew I wanted to do something different and come from an overeducated family, so I knew I couldn't do that. But that was like step one. A neighbor hooked me up, and my takeaway from that is that the people out there, everybody can do something like right now. Like, then maybe we'll get into it later, but steps you can do right now without money and without going to the bank. And
so you're saying I didn't have to sell the GTO?
Hell no.
Damn it.
I didn't know that then. I know that now.
I know you were just getting going too, though. At that stage, that was what, 1996.
Oh, it was now like 89. My first house.
No, I was talking about when we were talking in the clean rooms there at Hewlett Packard.
We were going face up on the basketball court.
Oh, okay.
He's a quick SOB. My God. He ran my ass ragged out there at midnight.
Mm-hmm. Still couldn't beat you, though. Wasn't enough.
Oh, I remember us split games.
His wingspan. He's a pretty tall guy.
He's strong, but he's fast.
I just back him in. And,
oh, yeah. There you
go. Meanwhile, I'm picking his pockets while he's doing that.
But over and over again, like those early deals, and I got some pretty cool mentors that came along later. But I just had, I know Eric had this, and it sounds like you did from listening to you guys' previous stuff is, and I tell the girls that I coach volleyball, and I tell them at the end of practice that you want to be rich, go do this. And rich is to be defined, right? Maybe it's just fulfilling your career path, and maybe it's, so it's a moving target, but people that have an inquisitive mind and ask shitloads of questions, it's just absolutely the right answer. Mm-hmm. And then they can find that path.
I got a question for you, going even a click further back, is how did you know you wanted to get into real estate? There's so many options when you're just getting going, a pup, and you got a credit card and $5, in the checking account. How did you know it was real estate?
Well, I figured out I had to pay rent, right? At 19 years old. And I'm like, well, why don't they pay me rent?
Yeah.
So it was a very analytical process I went through.
So it's just internal. Like, you didn't have anybody telling you that you ought to get into real estate, or, this would be a good direction to go.
My mom would make the donuts. I'd sell them next door, down the street when I was 5 years old. And I always kind of bought and resold things, and it was kind of a deal guy. So I just had to find something bigger to buy and sell.
Yeah. And you just kept building on that essentially over the course of your life, as it turned into what you do, which we'll talk about. Elaborate a little bit more on. This just begs the question, though, because we talked about it last week, and it's always a point of curiosity. So you said a second ago, you can do these things without money, which I'm curious about, like how that transpires. But the whole seed capital, like how did even the first house at $28,000, which to a 19-year-old, depending upon what you got to put down or where you get, where did that come from? Like, how were you, was that just you'd save working it? I don't know. You tell me, but.
I was a painter, and I ended up with a gig on this guy that was building these new homes. And I was making $7,000-8,000 for doing these homes, and about half I could leave with in money. And I would paint the inside and the outside, and you'd go do the next home. So we're kind of, chronologically, it really worked for me on a monthly basis.
Yeah. And
so I'd make $4 or $5 grand a month, which way back in the day was money.
That's good money.
So I saved $5,000 or $7,000 or whatever, and I gave this guy at $28,000. I gave him $5 grand down.
Okay.
And it's one of the ways to make money without needing any money, because he didn't want a down payment. So the house was not financeable. He owned it for cash. Okay. He was an older guy. He would rather have the income stream instead of the payoff, because he was going to get killed in taxes, because he was a high income guy.
Yeah.
So all of his marginal dollars he was getting hammered on. So he's like, just pay me monthly and show me you can do something nice to it and fix it up and give me a reason for doing this deal. But I only owned it for 2 months.
Yeah.
So, he was happy. I was happy.
And then from there, was it, you knew you wanted to stay in real estate, and you just kind of went and continued to find more. You were like, well, that wasn't that hard.
This is the best thing ever.
I found this, and then go get another one. And
still looked like a turd when I sold it, though.
Why is that?
All we did is I hired my brother to put a roof on it. And it was like a 12-14 pitch. The house is still there.
Yeah.
It's over by where the Beavers play football in Corvallis.
Yeah.
So it was like that. And he was hanging off these, the skip lap, he's peeled the shingles, and there had been like 3 fires in there. So we have to fix the fire stuff and put the roof on there. And somebody came along 2 months later and like 40 grand. I'm like, done. It's like bought another one. But all cash, the seller carried.
Seller carried.
A lot of reasons for that.
Is that still a thing? You see seller carry as much as you did back then, or has bank financing just become that much more accessible, or what's the ratio there?
Know where to look, and I think we've talked about this before. Like when you play a poker hand, I like the ones that work for flushes and straights and the suited connectors and kind of high. And if you're playing a hand 5 different ways, just the physical condition of the property is one of the ways to play real estate.
Yeah.
And when clearly the bank isn't going to give a loan on this thing, there's no foundation and whatever else.
Yeah.
You can win on just fixing up the home. But as we'll talk about later, and he's done over and over again, is you can win big on contracts. You can control a lot of real estate with no money, just on how you word your contract.
How you word your contract for
the
transaction itself?
Yeah.
Really? Huh?
You can buy yourself months. Wonderful thing.
And how long did it take you to learn that part of the business? Like, you started, you got your first house out. Now you got some cash, you moved to your second house. And then, did you have a goal in mind, or were you just like, I want, because Eric and I talked about this, like when I asked him, like, what was your sort of driver when and you're like, well, my dad said if I own 5 properties and I get, I have the, so you sort of had a bit of a goal, a benchmark, and maybe, exceed that or whatever you did later in your life. But what about you? Like, what was your goal? Did you have, a number, or was it an economic thing, or I don't know. I'm just kind of curious with that, like just starting that process.
Well, I think we have in common here between the three of us is I've listened to some of the things you guys have talked about before. It's like nervous people like to wiggle. It's like the bed sweats and their legs are just doing that, right? And you had to go do something because you got to do it. It's like, this possession inside of you that said, I need to go do this. And if it's not that, it's going to be something damn close. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to do something else. And like a super inquisitive mind and never taking no for an answer and being willing to learn the things that you don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's just the foundation for, there's this cat that he knows, Derek.
Yeah.
Different Derek.
Mm-hmm.
Can I digress for a moment?
Oh yeah. Let's go.
He's living in the second home with me. So I buy and sell the first one, move in the second one. I'm fixing it up. Same kind of thing. Not wonderful. Right behind the stadium.
Yeah.
And he's like, Jeff, how do I make money? And I'm like, sell your goddamn motorcycle. What the hell is that?
Same advice. He keeps passing along. Sell that thing you really enjoy.
Well, it was a different thing because he's gonna die on the damn thing. The dude was the second coming of Lucifer on that thing.
Yeah.
And he's weaving and doing that shit like someone swings the door open. He's eating.
Yeah.
Oh God. So he's like, and he is like heavily impressionable. He was a former alcoholic or whatever, heavily impressionable. He's like, okay, well, what do I do then? I said, step one, sell that shit. So he sells it and he gets like $3,500. And I said, you could make $1 million doing anything. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, go buy a lawnmower. So the lawnmower.
I didn't know the story.
Yeah, Derek, he's changed his name to Durian Walker. He now lives in Thailand on the beach, and he's got these little huts he rents out. He's a crazy guy.
Yeah.
Gets a lawnmower, ends up with 6 or 8 of his buddies. They're mowing these lawns, and at the end of the day, he's got like 45 lawns he's mowing. He's got 7 or 8 guys working for him. He only carries the lawnmower down to be repaired or whatever. And he's making like $8,000 a month on lawnmowers. A guy digging a hole can make $1 million. You just got to dig bigger holes.
Yeah.
And so he gets done, and then he goes off and buys a couple of homes and ends up with some killer stuff down in Ocean Beach, Mission Beach, right by the lifeguard station, a place in Oahu, a place in Vegas. I go flying down there to talk to him. I'm like, Derek, what the hell are you doing? You don't have cash flow to support this. And in the meantime, I've worked up to apartment complexes and storage units and whatever. And he goes, dude, I got it figured out. Ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets. It works. You just say what your income is. They give you this money. It's the best thing ever. I'm like, dude, you're screwed. He goes, oh no, I'm good. I got it all figured out. I've got $5 million in assets. All I need is 5 to 7% appreciation per year. I tap that. I cover my negative cash flow. $70,000 a month. Of the $70,000 a month, 17 was lifestyle because we're going over a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
dude, you are sinking ship. A strong wind is going to take you out. Sell your shit.
Did he have a motorcycle then too?
No, he never bought the motorcycle again.
Buy another lawnmower.
So like it wasn't 3 months later. I'm like, go sell this shit tomorrow, right?
Yeah. And what year is this? Just
2006.
Okay.
Right before the tsunami. What's that movie about the big wave?
Yeah, because everything's good until it's like a better way to say it, till it's not, right? When the tables turn and the circumstances change, and we've all kind of lived through recessions, be it real estate or tech or whatever industry you're in. That was a dramatic one.
Yeah.
And getting through that, with those practices, I don't know how. I mean, a lot of people caved, and got crushed. And how does one understand when they've been accustomed to investing a certain way to sort of all of a sudden pull back? prior to that, I mean, or take advantage of it after the fact, like kind of you did, Eric, when we talked before, like now you're in a 9 and 10 and now the deals are to be had if you got happen to still have some cash sitting around. Right. So did he take your advice and pull back?
It was basically too late because, because I'd known him for 15 years at that point. Because this is like, early 90s. Fast forward to 2006, he had collected all these assets that are negative cash flow. And so I went down there and tried to talk him off the cliff. And 3 months later, the big thing hits, and it's the worst thing forever for him. And they're calling me looking for him. And it's the best thing ever for me. So he had to walk away from it, saying, that's why I went to Thailand, to he's avoiding all these debts. And it was the best thing ever for me. I went down to Vegas and bought a couple dozen homes at the time, and for 30 cents on the dollar. And he's walking away from stuff he can't support because he just wants to tap it. So it was only about refinancing. I mean, he was playing his poker hand only one way. And so depressed assets are a wonderful thing. Eric's shown that over and over again.
I like the beater.
The shit dinger.
Shit dingers. That's my favorite deal.
So were you playing your hand then in multiple ways? Did you have some, is that the moral of the story to some extent? Like, one trick pony. I mean, I guess unless you're really conservative, then maybe you won't be exposed, but then you're not going to have the upside if you're overly conservative, right? Yeah. So it was different classes of real estate investment over time. Is that sort of a bit of the, I don't know, the way that you went about it?
Yeah. And I think you could say now, with the businesses that I've heard you talk about, Pete, you went in kind of this way, and now you're like, oh man, there's a lot of ways to do this.
Right.
And I went in with, my hand over my eyes, trying to blindly feel my way along. And eventually you learn about these other ways. And in Vegas in particular, we went to auctions, we bought condos, we bought houses, we bought multiplexes, and it turned out to be a good thing, but there's some stuff we did wrong too,
Yeah. Everybody's got to do something wrong to try to recalibrate to figure out how to do it better.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I feel like it's, especially like, I don't know, you interview or you talk to people, everybody talks about the stock they picked that was a big winner. Oh yeah, I invested in Amazon back here, and it's harder to get them to talk about the stupid things they did or the mistakes they made. I mean, unless it's in a kind of a context like this, which I'm always curious, like what was the big mistake and how did you right the ship, after that mistake? I mean, did you have any sort of inflection like that? Probably more than one, but what jumps out to you when I say it? Because for me, like I've already shared mine on the podcast before, like they always jump out. Like I'm like, oh yeah, this is dumb. Like, but I can go back and I can see myself rationalizing why I did that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like totally irresponsible, but on the other hand, it was looking past some things that I should have been looking for.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And that term, like fools rush in, it's like, well, they're running that way. I'm going to run the opposite direction, and I'm going to be the smart one. Right. So I'm busy patting myself on the back, and I get down there and we invest in most all the properties were pretty good. But the two big mistakes is we bought one fourplex that was basically two blocks in the wrong direction. And it was basically kind of a mini war zone, and there was gangsters in there and stuff. And we put up the money, of course, to buy it, and then all the reparations and everything, and got it all going. And we sold it and barely broke even on this, like what turned out to be a $245,000 fourplex.
Barely breaking even to me is a success, though. Like that's
in that neighborhood.
A failure is you lost the 250, right? So that's, I mean, in my mind, if that's one of your worst failures, that's not that big of a failure, So, and not that I don't really need to get into the specifics of the financial aspect of it, but if that led to you changing behavior, and what was it from there that you did differently going forward that you were able to maybe see the 2008 thing happening or capitalize on whatever? What did you work into sort of your process after that you felt?
So the big takeaway is that you mentioned this before, exit strategy, right? So when you go into a market that's been hammered like Vegas, and you're in it for cash, because we had 7 figures laid out. And I was about 90%. My dad was about 10. And then we had another guy that had a little sliver. And we went in there for cash, and the banks wouldn't finance in this war zone, right? The whole city was decimated with too much inventory. So the stock market tripled. If I would have put the cash in the stock market, it tripled at about the same time these home prices tripled. And so I was in a zero leverage, bought all these homes for cash. And the retail value of what we bought used to be about $265,000. We bought for an average of about $65,000. So then when it tripled, we went through all the pain of acquisitions and these auctions and everything else to buy all these properties. Same time, we could just put the cash in the stock market. We've done the same thing. But we were too busy patting ourselves on the back or something.
Yeah. It's also like, well, how do you know the stock market was going to go up, triple, right? I mean,
yeah,
I feel like you guys are a couple of guys I know that have done a lot of real estate stuff in your careers, and a few of the other guys I know as well. You tend to play in the ballpark that you're comfortable, and they're really reticent about the stock market. They look at it as like, wow, this is this weird thing. It goes down 20. I don't know why it went down 25%. It's the same company, and I'm surprised sometimes to learn like what a percentage of how small a percentage of their assets are in that, and or they just kind of keep investing in their same asset class, which I guess in a lot of ways makes sense too. I mean, real estate is a huge asset class, right? It's a third of wealth in the country. So, why do you even need to invest in the stock market unless you're just doing it purely for diversification purposes? But yeah, no, looking back on those things, I'm sure, that could be,
well, did you even consider buying stocks during the first 10 years of getting going on real estate investing? Or were you just reinvesting all back into real estate?
So I left HP at 2002. That was like the last job I had, only so I could work harder. I didn't retire. I worked way harder in real estate, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I cashed out of my 401k. I had like 40 grand or whatever.
So not much stock even in 2000.
But I wrote a really shitty book about the best stock ever. And I said, 100% management control. You own all the shares. You get direct hands-on. You get a physical asset, not just a piece of paper. I had all these reasons lined up where I was writing my really crappy book because I'm not a good writer. I was a failure.
There we go. You got one.
And I was like, booyah! It's not stock; it's real estate. And so I was just hook, line, and sinker. And like, why would anybody? When somebody farts, this stock just goes ape shit, and I'm losing money. Why would I do that? And I got a bunch of friends that are all about, they have these big portfolios or whatever in stock, and they're dollar cost average. I got investment theory going on, and I got my debt stack on this particular bit. I'm a value investor. What's his name? Buffett's mentor, Benjamin Graham, value investing. And so I read through all that shit and through college and everything else. God, what a shit show. I want to trust people that don't wear a tie, that aren't sitting behind a desk, that have nothing to gain by telling me what, like you guys. You guys have nothing to gain by anybody listening to this deal. Those are people I want to listen to. I'm like, yeah, but they don't look nice. They don't have a suit on. Or, they're not trying to, doesn't sound good enough or something.
Yeah.
And that's something I want to bring up too, is that, as an up and comer, I had, the hillbilly conversations, and my dad wanted to own 5 houses. And so I kind of took that on subconsciously as a thing, but I didn't really have anybody that was really versed in that world of investing and having done it a little bit even, like in Oak Ridge, there was a couple of loggers that had their own logging company, but I didn't have really any guidance. And so I get to a point where, before I meet you, and I want to buy a place because I think it's a good idea. And I need a cattle prod like Jeff over here to come over here and just poke me in the nuts and go,
great, I've been promoted.
Yeah, I thought that's a decent
nickname. Asshole a cattle prod.
Yeah. How'd you guys meet though? Because he's in Corvallis. You're
trying to dominate me on the basketball court.
Oh yeah. That's where it started.
So we're working at Hewlett Packard in the clean room, just manufacturing stuff, there for printers, it was, just a way to get some income, and you were just up and coming too. But the thing that I can't figure out, and I'm really stoked on, is that you showed up and just said, "Hey, let's talk about money," but you didn't have anything to gain by talking about money with me.
Trying to convince myself, really.
And it's okay. So that's the answer to what I was going.
That's the motivation, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Because you had a duplex at the time, or a couple little things you were doing. It was kind of in the days of sell your motorcycle kind of moments with Derek and whatnot. But you had been doing it a little bit, and so then when you talk to me about it, I'm sitting there going, "Who is this guy?" You know what I mean? He's telling me to sell my redneck bank account, and does he really know what he's saying? And but yet, I lucked out because you weren't trying to take advantage of anything.
I wanted to buy his car. I offered to buy his car.
Did you? He's rolling it right now. He looks at me with a big smile.
My car.
I think he ended up with a better result there, actually.
Excuse my French.
I mean, it parlayed it into the next thing, right? So.
Oh yeah, but had you been like somebody who was just talking, business and that sort of thing to take advantage, I would have been screwed, because I probably would have been vulnerable to talking to you about it, and you would have eventually taken advantage of me or found some angle to and that didn't happen. And I feel really lucky, when it's all said and done, that you weren't that guy. But why do you think you were that guy, besides just trying to convince yourself?
Honestly, like, bare my soul, my dad died in 2015, and he knew he had something terminal. He took his own life, and he really was just brilliant. And 3 a.m. DXDT, he was doing thermodynamics, and he couldn't turn it off, right? And so I have some version of maybe without the academics. I was going to be an engineer, and I went most of the way through that, and I said, I'm not going to do that. But when you can't turn it off, and you got to find your own path, and you have a busy mind, and you really don't want to repeat. And my dad was he was always the smartest guy in the room, and he was a know-it-all. And so I had to do something where I was going to appear to know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm replicating the father here. And, we all watch our parents intensely. And when they get that little freaking wiggle on their forehead, you're like, that fucker's mad at me.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch. Like you're doing right now. You got it going.
Yeah. I'm not mad at you, though. I'm not.
That's the interest one. That's not the bad one.
Yeah, that's the interest one.
So I after you talk about your dad and your similarities and your disparities, and some ways they force you into a corner, and some ways they completely mold you.
Yeah.
And I think I had to go cut my own deal. And I was going to be relentless about it, probably because he was with what he did. And truth be known, he only lost money in real estate. And my first deal was with him. He paid me to fix up a house in South Carolina. Lost $5,000, and there was a fourplex behind it. And he lost $45,000. Owned it for like 8 or 10 years. Lost $45,000. He sold it, and he was happy to lose it. He was like, "I'm getting out of this."
They got him out of that thing, huh? Did he do other deals with you after that?
He ended up, after one of my first bigger deals was a 20, shit, man, I'm losing it, man. 27 units or 29 units in Salem, which I still own, in the late 90s. And I had to show him a loan commitment from WAFED, the interest rate, that I had the funds in the bank, the whole 9 yards. And he loaned me money at 1 point lower on the interest rate than the bank was going to do.
Yeah. And
then he proceeded to show an interest in what I was doing, because I was up there fixing it and working on it.
It's interesting, the father parallel, because I lost my parents' money too in that second investment that went bad. Thankfully, I made money in the first one and the more recent one we just had. So, gosh, they're the willingness to sort of support you. But one thing I think about, like, your stories and why what's to me is pretty inspiring is like, and I for some reason I don't know why, it seems like the narrative is that it's so hard to be successful and not everybody has the opportunities. I mean, you guys did it with so little capital out of the gate. And I don't know if the impression is that it's not, I can't scratch up that much capital, but I mean, you were a painter. You didn't go out and do something crazy, invest in Bitcoin and it tripled and now you got money. I mean, it was just I would say, lack of a better way to kind of frame it up, but the old fashioned way, and it's really refreshing because there are opportunities, and you just have to, I mean, it's the risk tolerance thing. It's all that kind of stuff we talked about before, but you were saying something of not being able to turn it off, and I had something to prove, or I don't know, but what do you think? Did you have any kind of chip on your shoulder? Like, was there ever the chip? Because we talked about the proverbial chip, and what's the size of that chip? Like, I got to do this because my old man, or whatever or I can't turn it off. But was there something else that you had to prove to somebody or yourself that led you down that path too?
Well, we talked about this a minute ago upstairs before we started this. My brothers went to the best schools in the country and multiple masters, and my dad is a multiple MIT guy and 5 degrees and all that. And my younger brother as well. So I was already the black sheep. And then again, I had to come up with being an expert on something, even if it's shoveling shit,
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think the most successful, my business partner is like a multiple time world champion wrestler, and like a real wrestler, not like a fake wrestler. And was in the leadership of the Olympic Committee and all that for the last 10 years and all that. And whether it's my insecurity or his insecurity or another kid that I got started in the business, there's a lot. We have a lot of relationships where we're trying to get kids going. Right? And another one turned out that he started property management for me for the first time in his life. And he ended up really insecure about his parents as well. So you mentioned your parents and mine. And it just seems to be a real repeating theme when you have this underlying, you're just not quite okay with yourself and until you do some things and you try to put some water on the fire. And I just felt better and better when people started to believe that they might want to listen to what I say, or a little bit even, that'd be enough.
Yeah.
But the irony is that I don't drive a very nice truck. I don't dress very well. I don't need to have
you don't have the time.
I don't wear gold. I wear
that's
one piece of gold.
That's not why you're in it, for that result. But
you did talk to a lot of people too in that clean room. I mean, it wasn't just me you were talking to. You would grab anybody by the shoulder and say, "Let's talk about money." And it was
12 hours at a time.
Yeah. Well, we were bored as could be in that place too. I mean, it was an awful job, but you were grabbing all kinds of people to talk to about it. I noticed that it wasn't just me, and I was like, man, this guy, he can't get enough of it. And at the same time, some of those cats did really well, and some wrote a book about it, some didn't do it. It's a variety of outcomes, but man, it's really cool that you have that nature about yourself to actually give back. Even then, you were doing it, which, I mean, I don't want to blow you up too much because and get you all fired up and everything. Because you didn't tell me to sell that GTO, so it's all said and done. But most people that I run into historically that are successful and self-made, they aren't teachers. They're doers, but they're not a teacher too. And you have that combo, and that's just a special sauce that needs to be shared. And there's a lot of people that could benefit, especially from somebody who doesn't need anything from you as a teacher.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's like a big part of kind of, I think, what this is. These conversations that we're having. But
that car thing, like, if you're going to describe my investing, my insecurity / I don't think I'm the best at anything. I just think I'm okay at several things. And I think that's all it takes. And I don't think it takes 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. I think it takes 1 hour a day of being totally focused and just babying it all along. But yeah, that whole thing kind of right out of the gate, and why you're doing it and where you're doing it. That property manager that I just mentioned ended up managing 2,000 units now. He's like the biggest property manager in Salem, and he's killing it. He's doing great. But my investment theory is something like RFN, like right effing now. Because whether it's you selling your DTO, and with that particular kid, he took over my really shitty spreadsheet of property managing my properties, and I could all lay it out. Look, man, I got some macros in here, and I got a little Visual Basic going on. I can do some shit. I just press this button, and it gives me this number. And he's like, yeah, this thing's horrible, right? So he took my property management thing, and he's the second coming of Christ on this property management thing. I'm like, God, you're way better than me. And we're standing in a rental property that he lives in, and he's like, Jeff, I don't know how you do it. I can't find a place to play. I've been looking around. I've been scouring Corvallis like Eric and been scouring. I can't find, you said, look in this neighborhood, look for this and that. I can't find anything. I'm like, how about this one? I went over standing there. Right? So I said, you got the owner's phone number? Yeah, but she's freaking crazy, man. You don't want to talk to her. Call her. Puts her on speakerphone.
Right then and there, we
did it right even now.
Yeah.
We had a deal in 15 minutes on the phone.
Well, that's the. I mean, you're kind of going to the traits of an entrepreneur and have an outcome, the initiative part.
Yeah.
Right. I think people think about things a lot, and you can analyze to, the nth degree, and try to make your probability analysis. But at some point, you got to act. You got to take initiative. You got to make the call, and that's, for some reason, I don't know why people get tripped up on that, because it's the first step to getting something going. Like, see if there's interest there. Like, I mean, even your old mill course with the whole Bill Smith getting that whole story, we'll talk about another time, but how you got that going, right? It's just, you got to make the phone call. It may not work out.
RFN, actually, yeah, right there. That was
right. RFN.
Yeah,
there's our new little acronym here.
He got the deal for no money down, had time to fix it up, and all he really had to do was push his money into the improvements, or he was going to lose the deal, because he had to hit the milestones. And the seller was happy because they're a high income individual. They just want to keep it rented in the meantime. And they said, fine. They tried to switch him up later, by the way.
Did they?
We wound up in a gunfight, and they brought a rubber band, and I brought a howitzer.
You got her done. Well, you're kind of jump back to another thread we were talking on. You guys are giving me a little bit of inferior complex on like how I'm raising my kids, because I think all of us talked about like we had something to prove to our dads, or they were better than us, and here I am doing the opposite. I'm like, son, daughter, you got everything. How can I support you? Because you're trying. I'm trying to, because I always felt that with wasn't good enough, or I wasn't smart enough. There was always a bit of that angle with my dad, and I mean. And look, however you use it to motivate you, but it's just, it's weird how that psychology is there. I mean, like, when your dad maybe says he's proud of you once in your life, right?
Yeah.
And hey, if my dad ever listens to this, great dad, I love you. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm happy who I am. I'm happy with who you are, but that's not how I'm parenting, right? I'm like, I tell my kids, I love them. And I'm like, I'm proud, because if they do, I'm proud.
You got to cut that out, man.
But it makes me now like, now it makes me feel like, shit, am I
dry up on the love.
I gotta come in and like kick the door down. Like, what's going on here? Get off your phone. But it's not my style, It's just not. I don't think it. And so now I don't. I mean, I guess part of my point there is we're going to derive. You have to derive a chip from somewhere, and maybe that's a common thread that somehow the three of us had. But they're going to find it, or they're not going to find it, or they're going to be, I guess, semi-wired that way or not wired that way. I'm not sure. It'll be an interesting kind of an experiment, because it's a different type of parenting style. But I mean, I feel like I had to develop that a little bit. Like, okay, I had a little bit of that, something to prove to myself, and not necessarily to the world more, but it's mostly to myself. But some of it was that. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't all. There wasn't some piece of that was. Sort of contemplated in that,
When we were talking about that before with the chip on the shoulder conversation, I left that conversation and I was trying to find exceptions to the rule, but generally when I see it with other people and myself, it's usually the dad. The dad gives a chip on the shoulder to the son or the daughter. The moms are so nurturing and so beautiful and loving.
Yeah.
That it's just, generally speaking.
Yeah, they let you win at games and shit. That's just wrong.
but dad will, put it to you sometimes, in some way or another. I think that's like the chip factory is the relationship with the father, oftentimes.
Yeah.
When you're standing there as like an 8 or 9 year old kid, and you've done something wrong, and you're looking at your dad, and he's just going to beat your ass or whatever it is, right? And you can't stop from crying. And you're like, I'm going to show him a man. I'm not going to cry.
Yeah.
I'm going to show him.
Yeah.
And you can't control it. I mean, I think that's like the most raw reflection of you're 9, your brain's about the largest it's going to be, right? You're most impressionable about fourth, fifth grade. Stand by me, right?
Yeah.
All I heard was sick balls, Chopper. Anyway, digress. And that's where you do this big framing thing. So, like Dreyfus says, am I the one that's in 4th or 5th grade, and am I that young impressionable kid still now as a 55-year-old? And I think largely we are. And so I think chip on the shoulder refers to the fact that I'm pissed. And I think for me, I was just more truly very insecure about who I was going to be and what I was going to do. And if I was ever going to be an expert in anything. And do I need to be an expert? No, but I don't want to be disrespected. So people screw with you and give you shit or whatever. But like for me, my red button is like the second they publicly disrespect me, I'm like, I'm going to show you what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it takes me a lot to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the source of motivation. Yeah. No,
I try to disrespect you all the time, but it just doesn't work.
Can't get there.
He said it takes a lot. Keep chipping away at it.
I gotta get better.
You might get there. Yeah, you gotta get better. You need to be more. You need to be more determined.
That's on me.
I trust your intentions, though. God damn it! So you're never going to get there.
I want to compliment that.
God damn it! You're just a nice guy.
You got? Did you have like goals? Like you say, like I don't need the number per se, but I mean, financial success. Like, what did you have a time frame in which you wanted to achieve it, and then what did it mean to you if and when you did achieve it? How to your lifestyle? I mean, all the other things that are important to success besides like, continuing to be really good at something and having a good result. I mean, I think that should give one self-satisfaction if they've mastered something throughout their life. And even if they've made mistakes, if they've ended up kind of in the win column. But I suppose once you kind of sort of get there, is that all there is, or what else needs to be part of that equation for you feel as an entrepreneur to be successful?
Well, you ever hear Michael Jordan talk about his brother?
No.
So Michael Jordan says, best basketball player I've ever known is my brother, especially when I was growing up. And yes, you run into the athletes.
Older brother, younger brother?
I think it was his older brother.
Yeah, I think I do recollect a little bit.
Insanely fast. He used to be taller than me.
Competed with, just kept cutting him down, like,
drove me into the ground. Yeah. And my older brother, I worshipped, because he was slightly taller, slightly stronger, slightly smarter. He has all the gifts to this day. And then my younger brother, slightly shorter, but very intelligent.
So you're middle. You're the middle kid. Three boys?
Yeah.
You and I both middle.
And so I was fiercely competitive with them. It didn't matter if it was tiddlywinks. We were going to almost go to blows on every freaking thing. And we didn't play basketball. We played Kill Your Friendly Neighbor, which is a version of having all of our neighbor kids over and elbowing and slamming and jam hooping and all that stuff. Oh, yeah. And some serious injuries came out of that, which was really fun at the time.
Yeah. I remember some of those matches as well. Yeah.
Just fun, right? Shit, you remember.
The football ones, right? The sandlot football, tackle football.
Oh, yeah.
You got the guy in the ground in a headlock. That's not really part of a tackle.
Well,
but anyway, yeah.
I mean, because I can go off on tangents, but for your question specifically, just what I initially wanted to do was to get a really good start out of the gate to kind of prove the concept, which is, like a SWOT analysis, your strengths and weaknesses and opportunity. Yeah. And I had my degree by then and all that, and I had to prove the concept and get a couple properties and get out of I want to jump off the hamster wheel, right? And so many of all of our friends are going to be on the hamster wheel their whole lives.
Yeah.
And so I had to do that. And so leaving in 2002 was a big deal for me. I was 31 or 2 or something. And they're like, "Oh, you're retiring?" I'm like, "No, I'm not retiring. I'm just leaving this job to go do a job that's harder." And so I can't really claim.
And that job, going to do the job that's harder, was you going on your own and doing real estate at that point.
Yeah.
And maybe a partner or something, because you'd mentioned like I had another guy or two that you may have invested with you. But so that's your leap of faith at that point.
Yeah. And I had hit some monetary goals that I wanted to hit.
Prior to that,
and I had a collection of properties then. Some people it's 5 houses, right? Like an engineering job is 5 to 7 houses paid off. I had some other mentors that made that equation, and I didn't have houses at that point. I had more apartments and some other restaurants and things. And so I felt like I could take the leap, and I was still nervous and insecure and, not full of myself. I wanted to be full of myself.
Yeah.
But your goal was to get out of the hamster wheel then, really. And so what did that mean? Like monetize that somehow?
So for me, I knew I wanted to replace my income, and my income at the time was 70-some thousand.
Mm-hmm.
I had the 40,000 401k I mentioned, and I was making more than that on about 75 total units of houses and apartments and things. And but I was buying in those chunks that I mentioned, like the 29 units all at once, and I had another 15 houses or something. But so many I bought. The first one I bought, I said, well, you can buy with no money down. The first one I put money down on, right? But I bought quite a few times without any money and just on contracts and double closings. And there's really so much power, and something we haven't really touched on, but the power of the contract to control assets, unique to real estate.
Yeah.
Is so powerful that people can do RFN.
RFN, yeah.
I gotta get a tattoo of that shit across my forehead.
It seems like you could teach a class on the contract aspect of it, because I feel like that information isn't really readily available. I mean, you kind of go into if you're just a novice and you're trying to buy something, you don't really know, like,
wow,
is there 10 different ways I could do this, and what are the key levers in order to sort of get this done? I mean, that would be pretty fascinating, to help someone set that up. And I'm sure you have already with some of the people that you mentored. You've said, like, property managers or other investors, and because maybe that's why I would have insecurity around real estate investing, because I don't have that sort of insight, And how long did it take you to learn that?
I have to tell you a funny story, because you just triggered something in me.
Yeah.
You're a deep thinker. You didn't warn me.
No, I know. Like, I was thinking about this before you get into this. Like, today, someone would say, "Okay, you're doing this podcast, blah blah blah. You ask a question, do this stuff like that." I'm like, "Well, why do I even do that? Like, why does it? Why?" Because honestly, like running companies, when you had teams that you're managing, which I've kind of been doing since 26, I'd get in a room with like 8 to 10 people, and you're their boss.
Yeah,
you got to get information out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if all you're doing is sitting there rambling about your view of the world, but you're not asking questions. So I was thinking, like, it's just so natural to go in a scenario and be like, well, why? Because I need them to talk and give me information to make better decisions.
Yeah.
So it just carries over to my inquisitiveness, and probably you guys too, to make your investments. So anyway, I digress. What did it trigger?
Well, because I have this deep-rooted insecurity.
Yeah.
And because I don't like to be disrespected, and Eric knows this, and Jesse and Derek, there's about 15 guys that have all done their own version of real estate. And by no means have I done anything other than kind of trigger them to get started. They've done it their own way, yeah, or about their shit or whatever. But I've had friends like who've come over to Bend before, and we've run into some uppity investor or realtor or whatever. Yeah. And they'll purposely, Jesse did it to me over here once, they'll perfectly start shit and then look at me knowing I'm going to freaking unload and be like, oh, so you think you're an investor and blah, blah, blah. And they'll say something that's super snotty and whatever.
Condescending practically, yeah.
And Jesse will just sit back and be like, okay, go.
He can't help himself. It's going to happen.
It just get me going. God, I got to just shut up.
But that's like a bit of your, that's the fire and the passion that makes you continue to be successful or want to be successful or prove people wrong. And, one of my big curiosities with like why people end up with good results, or just kind of the traits, like what are their characteristics? What are the traits? Like the question I like to ask, like, what 3 traits do you think are necessary to having a good outcome?
Yeah. Right.
And, you and I have talked about this, like the relentless thing, and we riffed on that for a while. And, and certainly there's sort of pattern. I talk about this pattern recognition. I think first of all, if I'm investing in an entrepreneur, like what's the pattern recognition I'm looking for if I want to make an investment that I want to see, but it's not a precise formula. And every time I talk to someone, I'm sort of getting something else in this thing going, like, wow, this is interesting. Cause you've mentioned a couple of times this insecurity thing.
Oh yeah.
I'm insecure, which is, I think, first of all, it's great to sort of reveal that that's an okay thing to have. Like, Whereas other entrepreneurs I've seen that they have just the opposite of that. Like they're super confident. I'm like, I thought, how are they so confident? Like,
Yeah. You know what I say?
because I never had that level of confidence, but I wasn't going to let my insecurities hold me back either. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. One of my things that I use over and over is if you over promote something, it's probably not true. And so when these guys are coming across super confident, they're just faking it until they made it.
Yeah.
But they weren't all that confident, probably. You know what I mean? Occasionally you might just run across the person who has no insecurities, but if they're trying real hard to come across real solid, and then some of those guys wear suits, that's where you start going, what are you over promoting here?
Right.
I don't know if I want to listen to this guy anymore.
Right.
It doesn't seem right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I'm just a skeptic or something, but yeah, over promotion can be a problem, sharing some of the insecurities. I mean, that's cool shit. Cause where's the chip come from?
Yeah.
The chip on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And if you don't have one, then are you going to be really driven to go down this road anyway?
Yeah.
So what would be those traits for you? Like you think are necessary? Like you said, 3 things I look for if I'm going to be an investor, let's say in somebody's project, or just that you felt were traits that, served you well, I should say.
Well, I had a professor at Lynn Benton Community College, and he was an ex-colonel, had 10,000 guys under his command. And I would show up at his office because I loved economics at the time. So I was thinking, social science, and I could turn this knob and that happens, and I could change the supply and demand curve, and I could make all this. But this shit is for real because I can totally pick a statistic and defend it. Then I could do the opposite and defend that one.
Yeah.
And he's like, Megy, you're bugging the shit out of me. You're here every day or whatever. We just sit and talk about life. And he goes, you're going to be wildly successful. And I said, I've never heard that. Like my dad never told me he loved me or whatever. And even right before, he took his own life, he knew it was the last trip he's going to see us. And we went out to Florida to see him. And so this guy was like that, very strong leader, is like my dad. And so I'd bug him and I'd try to get whatever I could from him. He's like, you're going to be wildly successful. And I said, I've never heard that. B, my brothers are blowing it up with these masters and everything. And I said, you got to tell me why. He goes, well, you won't shut up with the questions, including the question you just asked me. And he goes, you have a hungry mind. You're going to feed it till you make it. And you will find the answer. And you're a rich man right now. You just don't know it.
Love it.
And so
I love that someone kind of could, foreshadow that or already see that as so important to an outcome. And you as a young person wouldn't necessarily have even seen that as a value, right? You're like, I'm just curious about this, or I'm asking a lot of questions because I want more information.
Yeah.
So that's a huge one for you, right? The fact that and that led to a lot of question around the deals or whatever, the structures, can I change this contract? So ask. And then you have the best understanding that you could possibly have.
Yeah.
Still needing to take the risk, so you got to have still have a risk profile, but that's pretty cool.
And I don't really, so that's one. I had to figure it out.
That's one trait. You feel like be inquisitive, ask a lot of questions.
And then I don't have any close friends I don't get anything from, or I don't admire their traits. I don't have any. Like, I can't just sit and chew the fat. I can't just talk about things that don't matter.
Yeah.
So I think that it's an old adage, surround yourself with people that you want to be like and whatever. But I'm looking to further myself. So I tend to kind of tailor it towards the general direction I want to go, which I'm not always clear on what that is.
Yeah.
But even looking back now, because at one of the businesses we have now, there's about 135 employees, and then another business, there's about 35 employees. So of that 180-ish employees, I can tell you there's 5 that are freaking going to set the world on fire. Not just because the colonel told me and now I want to replicate, but whatever. You can just see they can't sleep at night. They are on it. They won't leave me alone. And I'm just like, hey, you got to shut the hell up.
You're at that point where like, I want more time. I'm cruising, I'm traveling, whatever. Yeah, good for you. Go get it type of thing. No, but obviously you've helped them along and you sound like you're mentoring them. That's good. No, so you see it the same as in these people too, right? And now that you've seen it sort of, work out for yourself in a meaningful way,
And I don't want them to go do jobs. I don't want my kids to go do jobs that they want to do. I want them to do every shit job out there. And then like the old rental van that you bought from Oregon State surplus, and now you're driving around because you can't afford anything else, that little buzzer that goes off.
Yeah.
Beep, beep, when you back up.
Yeah.
I want them to back in. So then now they're very clear on all the shit jobs they don't want to do.
Yeah.
They become increasingly clear on what they might want to do.
That just takes time too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can't be overnight.
They're going to back into that bitch one way or the other. I'm pretty sure I don't want to do shit work with you, Dad. Okay. Took a while to get there.
Yeah, that's no. I like the the inquisitiveness that you kind of said something else, like reading between the lines. You're like, I don't want to be in meetings or with people that are wasting a lot of my time.
Yeah.
And
I hate meetings.
That's another one for me that's been a big driver. And it was kind of, I was curious to hear how important that is to you, because I hear you sort of say it, because I remember when I did work in corporate America, or even after my last company was bought, and I had to, we had to earn out and the whole thing, and I had to go fly to New York and sit in these meetings with the bosses, and, I'm now at the exec table. It's just such a waste of time.
You do like a 4-year postmortem.
I just couldn't. No, it was a 2-year that actually got negotiated down to 1 year after the first year, because the CEO, he called me up. We made our earn out the first year. It was only about 20% of the deal. We had an 80% payout, but he goes, let's just call a spade a spade. Like, you don't want to be here. You're not. I'm asking you to come out to meetings. You're like saying no. I'm your boss, basically. And that's what it was. I've been it, and I wasn't looking for this outcome, but long and the short is he ended up like saying, why don't we just accelerate the second year of the earn out, and we'll pay you guys out. Just help me with these things. And so we kind of renegotiated. So that all got done. I didn't have to stick around even for the second year.
Nice.
But I was already at this point, right? I'm over 50, and I'm kind of know myself a little bit better, and know that I really just can't. When I'm younger, I could tolerate those meetings a little bit. You know what I mean? You can kind of sit because you think you're going to learn something, and there's probably something to be learned. But by the time you're in your 50s, there's not as much to be learned, especially if you're not aspiring to kind of have this big corporate career. So I know there's a question in there, but when I'm listening to you and the wasting of the time, I wonder if that's a common thread too in the pattern recognition. Because like I know you don't like to waste your time, Eric. Like you kind of went down, charted your own path. Like you took that job here in Bend. You said it lasted a week. You're like, I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And you went back, and then you started going down your path to real estate. And there's something about you got to have that. You got to have that piece in this equation, because otherwise you're willing to tolerate a lot of bullshit, and nonsense, and that's it. That wastes time. So did you have this trait in you at a very young age? Like when you were working for HP?
Oh God.
I mean, was that just like did you feel like someone was just like killing you every day when you were working there, and you just needed to get out? Cause there's a lot of wasted time. I mean,
well, they call it's like PhD syndrome. You go into these meetings with a couple of, IC designers and a couple of Emmys and a couple of double E's, and it's a pissing contest. They're going to lay it out on the table and see whose is the longest, and they're going to explain to you why you're exactly wrong.
You got to listen to every single one of them.
And I'm just like, head back, mouth open, and I'm not here for a pissing contest.
Yeah.
You guys aren't headed anywhere with this. So if you can't get there, because I was an R&D manager, so I kind of had to employ whatever it is they came up with.
Yeah.
And so if you can't say it in 5 minutes, and have me ask to further discussion, I just don't want to have a discussion, because that's, meat and potatoes, that's max 5 minutes.
And I think that management style, that trait, sometimes that like annoys people, because like it seems like you're insensitive, that you don't want to listen to them.
Guilty.
Talk about kind of stuff, but it's just really efficient.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, just kind of getting to know you a little bit, that when you run your companies, you run these sort of tight meetings. Like you got a 35 person company, 135 person company. I remember this thing like with Andy Grove with Intel, like he'd go in a meeting with this, like a little alarm clock stopwatch, and it'd be 30 minutes. He'd go, ding, and he'd hit it right when the meeting started. And you guys, if it was a 30-minute meeting, it was
the chess clock.
And then he'd be like, okay, we're done. And I think we try to be like, considerate or empathic, or however you want to look at it, to our employees and this and that. And I think that's important. But on the other hand, it's like, There's only so many hours in a day. Like, and that's a great management style if it's appreciated.
Yeah.
And I think incorporated and taught in the right way. But sometimes you can't do that unless you're the boss. Well, if you're not the boss, you're gonna have to sit in that meeting, right? And that's what that was really annoying for me.
I won't go to my own meetings now that have managers do it, right? And I just fly in and shit all over and fly out. The corporate secret, right? So, but you can invest in individuals outside the meetings, right? So I'll stop and talk to the person that's cleaning toilets at midnight and take a genuine interest in where they're going in life and whether they want to buy a house and whatever it is they want to do, and still not want to sit my ass in a meeting and listen to endless fluff,
Yeah.
But I think there's still ways, to do that. Let people know you care about it.
So, absolutely. No. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't do it. I think it's a part of it. You got to get to know what their motivations are and stuff like that. But I feel like in today's age, it's a trickier balance, because management styles change and, the literature around how you should manage changes. And I'm not so sure all the change is really that beneficial at the end of the day. But kind of the underlying trait there really is impatience, and because however you justify your impatience. So I know I'm definitely, like you called, the mind that's not turning off. I mean, did you consider yourself when you're younger to be impatient?
Yeah,
like the RFN thing, because that's an indication of impatience too. And again, my weird thing with pattern recognition, I'm kind of going like, well, God, are we all just impatient people?
I think so. At one point,
maybe that's a bad thing in other areas of our lives.
I admitted to Jeff one time, and I thought I was saying something bad about myself. I was like, man, I'm just an impatient bastard, and Jeff goes, that's a good trait. And I never looked at it.
See, that's the
same sense.
That's a good one then.
Horrible insecurity, I think, is the best thing ever.
What is?
Yeah.
I mean,
the horrible insecurity.
The pendulum swings, right? When somebody's way too happy, they're going to be dark. When someone's way too confident, they're being driven by the fact that maybe they don't believe themselves.
Yeah.
And like that whole RFN thing, when I was listening to you guys' thing before on this for part of it, I was like, but wait, man, debt stack, financing, going to banks, checking with the family, selling the car, whatever. I'm like, dude, I need right now. I need right now, and I need it now. And, like we talked about, like no money down. Everybody talks about no money down, but no one tells you how, right?
Yeah.
And I ran into one of these. I was down in freaking Playa del Carmen. He was in Tulum or in the past, not the same time, but. And this guy's like, yeah, tell me how to buy with no money down. And I'm like, well, if you do a contract, right? I'm like, I don't know why you don't go buy 5 houses right now. He goes, I don't have the money. The bank said no. My parents said no. I got no GTO to sell, right?
Oh, poor bastard.
And, one of the biggest ways out there now is like, if I went to you and you're selling a house for $500,000 and you're going to play devil's advocate and we're going to do it back and forth.
Yeah.
And you haven't sold your house for 3 months. And I said, well, how does 510,000 sound? Your natural response is, that doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah.
It's more than what I want.
Yeah.
Only problem is instead of a 45 to, and you give them the reference, right? Instead of a 45 to 60 day close, let's do a 90-day close. And at the bottom, I want, to be able to have an assignable contract. Anybody I choose. Well, it turns out I've already got some buyers I've been working with for a while, and I'm not a realtor, right?
Yeah.
But I can buy and sell that house in one day using their money, because at the title company, they use their money, not mine. It's never visible to you.
Yeah.
Do a double closing, and I walk away with, $30,000. It doesn't countless times. Or even if you just lock up a house for 90 days, you fully intend to buy it, but you can't make money on the deal. You think you found a deal. Maybe it's repairable. Maybe the rents are low.
Yeah.
The contract is now favorable. They're going to carry you some amount of time. They might even loan you some of the money to fix it up because they know it's not financeable. And you put all these ducks in a row and you still can't make it work, then you let the deal go and it doesn't cost you anything. Yeah. So if you don't need money to tie up a house for 90 days, why don't you have 5 to 10 houses tied up right now?
Yeah. And then act on the ones that sort of meet the criteria at the end of that cycle.
And you just get better and better at finding the ones like Eric
I bet, yeah.
That are hidden gems, and you can control $1, $2, $3 million in contracts easily, like overnight. Not easily, but it's so doable. The double close thing and getting older folks to carry loans for you. It's like 3 ways you can go out right now.
Yeah.
Go control some real estate, get some older people to do, or help them fix a problem that makes them not able to sell their house right now.
Yeah.
Just right now. I just don't understand why everyone's not doing that. Just don't think the same. They don't.
Yeah.
They're not busy. They don't have to go solve a problem.
Right.
And you solved some big problems. With
Well,
your stuff.
they look at, maybe they see obstacles instead of opportunities, right?
It's too risky. I don't know how to write a contract.
Well, that's, yeah, exactly. Instead of going to learn how to do that thing and resolve it,
Yeah.
And it just goes back to that whole initiative and take action and put it in motion, and no matter what it is, right? I mean, we all have that in common, and then see if there's a good result from that. And if there's not, some people call it like fail fast, like fail fast. And I think the 90-day thing is an example of that. You got 90 days to basically fail fast. If this isn't working, I'll know within 90 days, or 60, or maybe even know within 30, and you're out.
Yeah.
You don't even need to take the 90 days. Like, you got to wait out of the thing right then.
Well, and even with commercial, and if you decide you want to go do commercial in any capacity, with restaurants or storage units or gyms or whatever, if you're less focused on finding a great property and you're more focused on a really great tenant that needs to find a home, but it's not their gig because they're really great at software, or they're really great at turning high-end properties in Bend or whatever, but they want to go start a shop in Corvallis or Salem or wherever it is, and you know about what they can pay and what they're looking for and whatever else, find the tenant first, then find the unit. And you got a guaranteed winner. You're standing at the finish line and everybody else is spinning in circles.
Yeah.
And it sounds, you make it sound really easy, and you always have. And part of that, though, I think, is being willing to bullshit people, and
Are
talk.
you saying I'm bullshitting?
Well, it's an Oak Ridge term, really.
You can smell it a mile away. He knows me.
No, just talking kind of endlessly and aimlessly, sort of like what we do sometimes here, is to kind of, sometimes there's nuggets in there. In that conversation that you wouldn't ever expect. Or it might be not the person you're talking to who's cleaning the toilet at your gym, but his cousin has a business in there. And all of a sudden that turns into something. But you just have to be, genuinely open to talking to people. Bullshitting, I guess, is, it may have a negative connotation, but the point of it is it's not necessarily a waste of time to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little easier.
You don't know where the source of the good information is going to come from, or the inspiration or whatever. And
Right.
Just sort of, wrapping up our time here, like, just the whole takeaway today, like, one of my big ones is this whole inquisitive thing and how that's such a common thread. And I'm going to challenge that with some of the other entrepreneurs I know. I'm just curious, did everybody have that, or did they just sort of, did someone mentor them into this area and then they just took off with it? Because I think it might be really one of those key things that you just need to have in you. And if you don't, you're a sinking ship at some point, because you're going to miss something, right? Because if you're not, you're going to miss the 2008 crash or the 20, whatever other correction. Like, you won't see the signs because you're not paying attention. You're not inquisitive. And you're just going to kind of fumble your way into that next thing. You still might, even being inquisitive, you still might get hit with it, but at least you sort of saw it coming, But just kind of wrap. Do you have some, Eric?
Oh, I was just going to say something about Jeff. Is that one of the compliments he told me that your dad told you at one point is that that you're good with people.
Yeah, probably
your
only biggest compliment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so
that's another one, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, and you really are, though. And
turns out I'm not, but yeah.
But I believed it.
Yeah, thank you, though. I'm trying to get a tear out of me, or what?
Hugs later, but something about being good with people, I like about that compliment is that oftentimes it means seeing life from their perspective, to be able to have a conversation with people. Yeah. You can't just always be seeing things straight from your own eyes and trying to just, it's too myopic, that way. And, and so when you go into a deal and you see that this house, these owners have these problems to solve, you've already started solving those before you even really had 10 minutes of talking to them, and you're fast at that. But it's looking for a mutual solution, and that's something that anybody could work on as a skill. and I call it bullshitting, but it's also, you're just trying to navigate what problem you can solve.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something I'd love to hear you guys talk about too is I think there's a huge piece that all of us as done we have strongly in common, and that's like you guys forewent something, the car, family's money, your own time, and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole delayed gratification thing, and I don't know if you guys have read about the marshmallow test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael's marshmallows.
Yeah.
It's a big Stanford study, right, in the 60s.
Yeah.
Been around forever, but that same 1 in 10, you talk to 10 friends, almost no one's going to do what you guys have done. And it's way less than 1 in 10. And so you got to talk to everybody to get your nuggets. And if you really want to help them, you got to talk to a lot of people to help them, even if you're only trying to convince yourself by doing that.
Yeah.
This Michael's Marshmallow is a podcast. I think it was Radiolab or Freakonomics. I can't remember which one it was, but it's the little kids are like 5 years old, and they put a marshmallow on the table, and they say, "Okay, kid, now you can turn around in your chair, and if you don't eat that marshmallow for the first 2 minutes, when you turn back around, we'll have 2 marshmallows for you." So it's a 2x return on your marshmallows, and it's really difficult for kids to do that.
Yeah.
And the one I read was like late 60s controlled study. They didn't tell them what the reward was going to be. It was like a 4th grade class.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah, it was like a formal thing. I think it was Stanford, but maybe somewhere else.
Yeah.
The Stanford marshmallow test. They walk in, they take over for the 4th grade teacher. They're wearing lab coats.
Yep. They're
They're like, "Listen, we're going to put something in front of you. Try not to touch it. We're going to leave for an unspecified amount of time." Turns out it was 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So the kids all get ready and they get their hands up the side. And they put the marshmallow in front of them. These kids are like,
"This could be like
"I want that."
2 hours."
Well, in the 60s, marshmallow was a big deal, right? It was a new treat.
Yeah.
And so then they only left for 15 minutes, and they came back, but they filmed them the whole time.
Yeah.
Immediately, like half of them were like, they didn't tell them what the reward's going to be. And then like another 20, 30% of them, 40% of them ate some part of the marshmallow, but left most of it, right?
Yeah.
And only like 10% of them. Well, fast forward, they're looking for the correlation in the next 30 years. They track the kid for 30 years.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty fascinating.
Turns out the success correlation was very big.
It was shockingly determined on how their outcomes on education, health, finance, relationships, and life. I mean, truancy, going to jail, like it was so predictive that they did a follow-up one, which is really interesting too. And they said, "We're going to promise you a treat afterwards." I remembered it as another marshmallow, but
they did. They gave him another one. They just didn't tell him they were going to give him another one.
But this follow-up was really cool because they said, we're gonna treat you with something better if you delay gratification. And then they take the initial prize, it's gone. And so if you think about parenting as a kid,
Ooh, twist.
Right. I mean, I got goosebumps when I heard that because I was like, this is so determinate. This delayed gratification at such a young age is so powerful that it was almost like it's just nature. You're born that way practically because you're 5. You haven't really developed a lot of skills at that point, but some parenting. Well, just imagine you got parents that go, "Hey, you know what? Yeah, if you buy that lawnmower, or I'll buy a lawnmower for you." And, I can't think of the example, but they basically don't perform and they take away the initial incentive and they're not consistent with that. That kid coming up from that household is really struggling to actually believe in that delayed gratification. Yeah. And that's tragic.
And it's kind of aside from whether they're insecure or they have a chip on their shoulder or whatever else is, can they fight their own desires for a reward that's unspecified later?
And I'm really glad you brought this up. I mean, this is another one of these traits, because there might be 10 that we have that we don't know, but they just get uncovered the more we talk about this stuff, because the whole delayed gratification thing, it's so important because it just takes time to build a result. I would tell you my biggest parallel for that in terms of a teachable moment for delayed gratification is sports, especially youth sports. And I've always enjoyed coaching because, you take football until you're physically big enough, strong enough, fast enough, until you put the time in the weight room, it ain't happening for you. Unless you're just the kid that grew to in 8th grade and you're already too big, but for most kids, so whatever the sport is, you're going to have to work at it. And that, and that's such a good sort of, metaphor or whatever for life, because if you don't have those like experiences, and I don't know if sports is obviously not the only one, but as a kid where you didn't have to sacrifice something that took a lot longer than you thought, you don't really learn that. and then you become, and I don't know if it's more difficult today or than it was for our time. That's another conversation. But I mean, you know, you get to hit the reset button. They talk about this in the video games. You know, you're losing the game, you hit reset. You know, and kids are starting to approach sports that way. Like, oh, I'm not successful right away. I don't want to continue with this sport.
Yeah.
Right. They're not willing to accept the delayed gratification. You got to have it.
I'm not playing enough. I'm going to sick mommy and daddy on you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know, as opposed to put in the work or
bulldozer parent.
You know?
Yeah. Not having that structure though. The second marshmallow isn't there and the first one's gone too, you know, because you delayed gratification. I mean, there's just
but like Jeff said, like we all had an opportunity cost, right? You could have used that money for kept your car because that's gratifying. You know, I could invest in something else that's gratifying, but instead you're putting it something you don't know when you're getting it back or if you're ever going to get it back.
You kind of have to trust a process that you don't know is going to be a payout.
Yeah.
Or how it's going to pay out.
You got to trust somebody sometime or you're going to, it seems to me like people start getting pissed off about 28 to 35 years old and they're like, oh my God, this is third grade math. If I don't do something, it's way more detrimental than if I roll the dice on something.
And sometimes you got to grind them, right? It's not it doesn't happen in the cycle that you wanted. The 2008 recession hits, you got to hold it longer. You got to refinance it. You got to grind. You got to, you know, do whatever, like leverage this property, change your asset portfolio. I mean, whatever, you know, that looks like. And
seeing those downturns is big. I mean, I've been through like 4 of them, you know, the .com and the early 90s deal, the late 80s deal. It just gives you a perspective, right?
It's kind of like the pulling of the marshmallow when the economy goes to hell. And like, I was going for the second marshmallow. Now the first one's gone. You know, what am I delaying all this gratification for? I should just buy a jet ski right now.
I'm a doomsdayer though. I'm gonna bury a freaking trailer truck here pretty quick. I've got an excavator.
What are excavator. Yeah, you're like what do they call like when you're sort of survivalist or whatever?
Prepper.
Yeah, prepper. You're going that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we don't need to head that way. Well, Jeff, man, it's really good to get to know a little bit about your story. It's kind of crazy when we start peeling back these onions. Like there's just so many layers that, you know, we could keep going on. And I hope we have a chance, and I'm sure we will, just over coffee or beer another time, just to kind of continue. Thanks for sharing all this, man.
Seaside, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I think even right here today, like someone's going to benefit from this. I mean, I've learned something, and I always love learning new things. We all do, and
what not to do.
And in my head,
what not to do.
And I just, yeah, exactly. But I mean, I could, you know, got to end it at some point. But in my mind, there's going to be 5 other questions, you know, I'll want to unravel here a little bit.
You can't shut it down, man. That's your best trait.
Yeah.
Well, that's something else that we should pick up offline because, you know, at what point do you get satisfaction out of other things in life too?
Yeah.
Right. Than just sort of the ability to achieve. Right. I mean, satisfaction in being present, if you know, overused term, but anyways, don't have time for that one today. But I mean, that's a hard learning. And when you kind of feel like you've met your financial goals, or you just decide I don't want to.
I never had goals, by the way. I just like the game.
Well, that's where you and I are a little bit different. You know, frankly, and that's.
I think that's great.
No, it is, and it's worth. I mean, it's worth sort of exploring that because you got to play to who you are.
Yeah.
You know, and
I wanted the freedom, not the money. You know, just wanted freedom.
The money was okay too, probably.
It's okay.
All right, man. Good chatting with you.
Thanks, buddy.
We'll catch up another time, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Right on, man.
Hey.